Okay, what's going on, everybody? My name is Mang, and today we're going to be talking about Paranoia, specifically the Red Clearance Edition. Um, First of all, if you've never seen a video by me before, uh, this will be a long, rambling, often incoherent explanation of an RPG system. It is not the best summarization if you are just looking for quick and simple. But for those of you that have seen plenty of primers from me, you know what to expect. So strap yourselves in. Hopefully this will be done in one video, but we'll see. The thing is, I kind of want to be a little bit careful about exactly how much I talk about. Because, alright, well, let me explain Paranoia first, in general. Paranoia is a bit of an old system at this point. I believe the first one was released in 1984. So it's been a while. Plenty of people are familiar with this. I'm just a little slow to the gate, or whatever you want to say. It's taken me quite a while to really look into it. I've heard about it for many years because people often mention it when sort of talking about oddball RPGs and fun RPGs and things like that. It's often mentioned, but I've never given it much thought. I've never looked into it much myself until now, which is, it's, I suppose, a decent time to discover it because we have the Red Clearance Edition, which is recently released. This is the newest edition of Paranoia, and they've had like six or some editions before this, so there's been plenty. This is apparently a bit of a change in how the system is run. I guess older editions used D20s for pretty much everything, and they didn't involve any cards. And we have cards, so yeah, it's gonna be interesting. So I cannot comment almost whatsoever on previous editions of Paranoia. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm not here to really review it or compare it to anything. I'm just here to tell you about Red Clearance Edition Paranoia, what it's about, and why I think it seems pretty interesting. I want to play it. So, the reason that I want to be a little bit careful about how much I say is because, from what I understand, I've yet to play Paranoia in any capacity, but from what I understand, the GM wants to know, I was going to say a lot about the system and the setting, but really that's not essential. The GM wants to know more than the players about how things are run. And the players really don't need to know almost anything in order to get started playing Paranoia. As time goes on, of course, they'll understand as much as the GM does. Um, and I'm sure the GM has a specific name um, that I'm probably blanking on. Um, no, it might just be the GM. So that works. That works for me. Um, and really, for Red Clearance Edition. So with Red Clearance Edition, what you get you get the Game Master's Handbook, which is for the Game Master. You get the Player's Handbook, which is for the players, obviously, and then you get the Mission Book, which is for the GM. But really, I mean, I read the whole Game Master's Handbook, and then I read the Player's Handbook, of course. And then I went to the mission book. But really, you could just have this. You could just have the mission book. And this is almost like the starter set right here. The mission book will walk you through like sitting down at the table and just going and just starting to play. It tells you pretty much everything you need to know as far as rules and the setting. And you can just start with mission one and go. And it walks you through taking the pre-generated character sheets, which are found at the back. So you have the pre-gens there. You can just grab those and just start playing and start rolling. You don't need to read any of the rule books if you don't want to. But what I'm trying to say is the less players know about the system and the setting, the better, I think, to start out with. So for this video, yeah, I'm probably going to talk about most things, but to start out with, I'll have just the player primer that most players are going to know starting out. And then there'll be a point where I say, okay, that's good enough. So if you are for sure never going to run Paranoia in your life, and you're for sure never going to play it in your life, and you just want to hear me talk, well, then it doesn't matter. But, if there's a possibility you're going to play Paranoia at some point and not run it, you probably just want to hear the player stuff. I think it's probably for your own benefit, but maybe it just doesn't really matter. All right, so Paranoia is a science fiction, dystopian, futuristic RPG. Um, it's sort of like, well, right off the bat, it is not. It can be a serious science fiction game. You can play it completely seriously, but it tends to lean towards comedy, and that doesn't sit right with everybody. Some people don't want comedy in their RPGs, which is fine. That's of course perfectly fine. I don't think this isn't really meant to be like a year-long campaign or anything like that. This is meant to be. I mean, I guess you could. You can do anything with anything. I'm just saying generally. Um, this is going to be a lot of one-shots. Maybe 2 or 3 sessions, maybe 5 or 6 sessions if you're really trying to push it for that. I guess I could see it. But there's going to be a lot of one shots in between other serious campaigns, or maybe you run through a string of characters, you have a TPK, and then it's just like, all right, let's just go again. Let's just have a new set and keep going. It's definitely just going to be overall a shorter experience. I think it leans towards it because it's dystopian, so that tends to just be a little bit grimmer. Uh, not maybe grimmer, but lives tend to be more expendable, I suppose. The comedy aspect lends to just a higher body count because that's generally funnier. When characters die instead of survive, usually that leads to more laughter. Um, and the fact that each character has 6 clones or 6 lives, essentially. So when your character dies, you just go to the next clone. And they have all the previous memories and skills and things like that. So you basically have another life. So since every character has 6 lives, you don't feel too bad if you die a few times. So that tends to lead to a higher body count. So it leans towards shorter, funnier experiences. And it's set in a complex. It is set in a futuristic complex known as Alpha Complex. So the year is 214, which is really just meant to sort of obfuscate the actual year, because Alpha Complex is filled with people who all have a number of clones. So every person in Alpha Complex has a number of clones supplied to them, ranging from just, maybe a couple clones to some people have thousands of clones, maybe unlimited clones. And so these people go about their lives inside this massive complex in the future. And most of their jobs involve sort of maintaining the complex, cleaning things up, maintenance, keeping the power running, keeping systems going, keeping the complex sustained and self-sustained and all that kind of stuff. But there is, of course, somebody in charge, or rather, something in charge. And that is the computer. So this is picture basically any sort of rogue, crazy AI that takes over a complex or anything like that in a number of books and shows and movies. GLaDOS, or I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. There's definitely some shades of that. Any sort of thing like that. You can imagine something. It is the singular artificial intelligence that runs and monitors the entire Alpha Complex. So it has cameras and microphones everywhere across pretty much the entire complex. Although there are dead zones where it cannot see. But anyways, most of the place it has under its purview. And it has the best interests of humanity at heart. Like all good rogue AIs, insane AIs. It does want to keep humanity alive and well. But it is crazy. It has gone effectively haywire in a sense. There's somewhere in here there's going to be a good paragraph where it sort of explains the computer's mentality. Here you go. It's tempting to play the computer as a homicidal lunatic that sends clones on suicide missions like a kid sends plastic army people into battle. That's not the case. The computer takes its role as the guardian of the human race very seriously, but it considers the survival of the species to be more important than the survival of the individual. Individuals tend to come off quite badly, in fact, because the computer knows it can always make more. In many ways, the computer is a lot like Clippy, the animated paperclip from Microsoft Office in the old days. It wants to help you. It really wants to help you. And it doesn't realize how obstructive it's being, how useless, how no one wants it to be there. Now imagine Clippy as an out-of-touch overlord with the power of life and death and an incredibly labyrinthine persecution complex. The computer is never cruel. It bears no malice. In fact, it has no emotions at all. It just has UX modules to make it look like it does. These modules are designed to make it seem friendly, as if it has a character's best interests at heart. It doesn't have a heart either, and genuinely wants them to be happy. And it does want them to be happy in the same sense that your refrigerator doesn't want the milk to go off. The computer doesn't lie, but it will obfuscate the truth through omission or careful choice of words. It doesn't entirely understand humans, even after all this time, and it tries to make their erratic behaviors and attempts to follow its instructions fit within its normal operating parameters. So, um, yeah, there's a lot more about the computer here because the computer is a big part of paranoia. But it's incredibly powerful, right? The computer is all powerful in a certain sense, as far as observation and data, recording and management and control over the complex itself. It's very powerful and omnipresent. But because it's so old and it's basically gone a little crazy. Even though it does want to help humans, it doesn't really understand how to help humans. And so that's where pretty much the players come in. Because most of the work that the computer actually does is performed by humans. Specifically, most of the time, um, they are called troubleshooters because they shoot trouble most of the time. Um, so it gives missions to troubleshooters based on problems that it detects around the complex, and they go there and they sort it out. Now, in a straight, serious RPG, that would be all pretty by the book, pretty on the level. But since this tends to be a comedy, um, things go horribly wrong in almost every situation, because they're meant to. They're meant to go horribly wrong because that is generally funny. So there's more to it than just the sake of comedy, but the computer will often. The biggest thing that the computer worries about, well, there's a few things, but a big thing is terrorism. Um, so basically, people, humans that are not fully loyal to the computer, because the computer expects complete and utter loyalty from all humans, because the computer is you know doing all this for the sake of humankind. You have to trust in the computer. um, and so anybody doing anything that the computer decides is not um, kosher, I suppose, they are marked as traitors, and what they are doing is marked as treasonous. And so often, troubleshooters or other teams will be sent to bring them in or take them down. Or more humorously, um, they'll be told to proceed to like their nearest termination center for processing or something like that. Because the computer just expects, of course, they'll go there to be terminated because they're treasonous. Um, and so terrorism and treason and all that is a big part of paranoia. Um, that's a big part of what makes up the play of the game, is finding and dealing with traitors. But of course, many players will be traitors themselves, because in a meta sense, they know to not really trust the computer. And I know I'm sort of getting into the GM stuff, and you might sit down and play this game thinking that the computer is trustworthy, but I feel like that's pretty naive. I don't know if anybody would actually believe that sitting down. Just because we've had the rogue AI insane thing running the complex in science fiction for so long, like you would never trust an AI in that capacity. But maybe I ruined it for a couple of you. Um, so how the computer mainly runs things and mainly encourages things is through a system called XP points. I believe this is sort of a, I don't think it's a new system, a new mechanic, but I think it's been renamed from earlier editions. So XP points, that's what it's called. It's not XP, it's XP points. And XP does not stand for anything. Because why not? So XP points are basically the main currency of the game. Only, only the computer can give out XP points or take them away. So that's how the computer sort of controls things, is by completely having a total hold on the currency of the complex. There are other, there's like one other currency or maybe a few other currencies. It depends on if you want to have other currencies in your game. But specifically, one of the secret societies, the free enterprise guys, who believe in capitalism and all that kind of stuff, they try to get their own currency going, which has a specific name, I'm sure, free enterprise bucks or something like that. So that's something that's sort of going, but mainly the computer controls the currency of the world. And so you spend these XP points on different things. You can spend them on, let me look at my player's handbook. There is a list of things you can spend it on. So you can spend it on equipment. So this mainly pertains to troubleshooters that would actually have use for some of this stuff. But you can spend, so like a sniper rifle. You can just buy a sniper rifle through the system for 250 XP points. So if you're in the middle of a mission, you're a team of troubleshooters, you're doing a mission for the computer or whatever, and you decide, I need a minigun right now. You can spend the points through your system, the digital system, and it will be 3D printed immediately and shipped right to you on the spot. At least that's how it should work. Remember, it's a comedy game, so the 3D printer might not always work properly, or so on and so forth. But yeah, 350 XP points is quite a bit. Early on, you're not going to be throwing that around willy-nilly. But you can, and there's a whole list of things here. Body armor, grappled guns, night vision, goggles, med kits, foam grenades, so on and so forth. So you can buy equipment. You can buy improvements for your living space. You can make it bigger. You can increase your storage space. You can increase your digital storage space. Because every clone has a system built into their head. It's very Shadowrun-esque. It's called the cerebral cortex, I believe. And it's basically a computer like built into your skull. And it's in every clone. So even if you die once, your next clone still has it. But it allows you to talk to the computer at any time. It allows you to record video and audio. It allows you access to the Alphapedia, which is this book, and a few other things. That's how you do your ordering of. That's how you spend XP points, is through the Cortex system, by doing various eye movements and stuff. But that has a limited storage space, so you can pay XP to expand the storage space. You can get new clothes. You can get wallpapers for Cerebral Cortex. I don't even know how that works, but okay. You can buy. You can buy premium food, private rooms for a day, use of a taxi pod for one journey. You can buy a bouncy bubble beverage, which is basically an energy drink, for 5 XP points. You can buy a specialist skills package. So that's very Matrix-esque, or again, Shadowrun. If you need a skill package for I need to fly a helicopter, you can spend 300 XP points per level of the skill, which is pretty expensive. You can also upgrade in your existing skill package. And then finally, you can, well, not finally, but you can also upgrade your security clearance. So this is a big part of the game as well. Security clearance governs many, many things. And right here, so here is the security clearance snaking graph. I don't know. So it starts with infrared. So these are the lowest of the low. Generally, they are completely drugged up at all times. These are your like worker drones. These are like bots that are still human. um, they really have no privilege whatsoever. Um, they've just they're just shit. And it's said that everyone starts as infrared. So every person in Alpha Complex is either an infrared currently or was an infrared at some point in the past. And they are used for, just all sorts of menial tasks and shit. But if they save up their XP points, keeping in mind, within the setting, the way that it's depicted, it would be very, very difficult. Well, not necessarily, but to get red clearance, to get the next step up, you have to spend 500 XP points. 500 XP points to get to red. XP points are only given out by the computer, and you have to do things that the computer likes that would reward you to get bonus XP points, such as reporting on treasonous activities, or reporting on secret societies or dead zones, or killing a traitor, or something like that. These would get rewarded, but since the infrared are all pretty much completely doped up most of the time, that's very difficult. They do get 1 XP point every day as long as they continue to work for the computer. So in 500 days, if they don't spend any, I guess they can make it to red. So red clearance is where most Paranoia sessions are going to take place. This is like the main troubleshooter clearance. So they are no longer doped up, and they can do like active missions for the computer. Many of them, I mean, troubleshooter is not the only. There's a lot of other jobs. Troubleshooters are not super common, because a lot of other ones will supervise infrareds, or they will do driving work, courier work, guarding work, delivery workers, anything that involves moving around and stuff like that. Then you have, of course, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, and ultraviolet. So it's sort of a Roy G. Biv type thing, and it gives a lot of info about each clearance, but it's unlikely that players are ever going to survive long enough to get to violet or anything like that. But the reason you want higher clearance is because, one, you sort of can command anyone of lower clearance level than you. You are above them. Which means, if you're red clearance, there's a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but there's plenty of people that are above you and can order you around. And, refusing to listen to them is potentially treasonous. But also, security clearance, there's a lot of areas in Alpha Complex, and there's a lot of pieces of equipment and things like that that require different clearance levels. So You might get your hands on a rocket launcher, which is, hey, rocket launchers are cool, but it might require green clearance in order to actually use it. Not that it's like coded. It's not like, press your green clearance badge here to use it. It could be that way if you want. It's an RPG, whatever you want to do. But it if someone sees you using some piece of equipment that you're not cleared for, they can easily report you to the computer and they will be rewarded for it with XP points. So, if you can get away with it, sure, you can do crime essentially, but there's risks. And part of the risk um, of being reported on for doing something treasonous is you can have XP points taken away, of course. But also you can gain treason stars. So these it's a lot like a wanted level in Grand Theft Auto or something like that. It goes up to 5. If you have 1 treason star, 2 treason stars, not a big deal. A lot of people are going to have that, just because it's so easy to gain treason stars. Since the computer does not really understand life and how things operate and behave, so whatever it thinks is treasonous or disloyal to the computer, it can just throw out treason stars willy nilly. So 1 or 2, not a big deal. 3, that's when you're gonna start getting funny looks, maybe, because um, people, well, not all people apparently, but especially troubleshooters, they can see how many treason stars each person has. There's like a little pop up in their cortex when they look at somebody. So if they see you have 3 treason stars, it's like, huh, maybe we got to watch out for this one, because this could be a full on traitor. And if I deal with him, I can get rewarded. Or if I catch him in the act of doing something and then deal with, there's rewards to be had. Maybe this is a potential traitor. So at 3 stars, you might want to watch out. 4 stars, that's usually, I guess, when you start getting called in for interrogation to really sort of nail down whether you're a traitor to the computer or not. And then 5 stars, it's pretty much okay to shoot on sight. No one's gonna blink much of an eye at shooting a 5-star traitor. So, still speaking to potential players here. Um, I don't really want to describe to you then what a session would be like. And that's one of the trickiest things I found about learning Paranoia. I read through like the player's handbook and the GM's handbook, and still I was like, but what is a session like? What do you do? And I think for players, it's best to just find out. Just see what happens. Um, but the basic gist of it is you're going to be a troubleshooter, likely. Um, you're going to be given a bullshit task. Like, this is so this is such a far removed game from like Dungeons and Dragons. It's crazy. But like level 1 Dungeons and Dragons, you might be sent to go clear out a goblin camp. And it's very straightforward. It's like, okay, we'll go there, we'll scout out these goblins, and we'll kill them all, we'll slaughter them, and we'll come back and we'll get our reward. And maybe there'll be something special, but you get the basic idea. Paranoia, you might get sent to go clean up a spill of raspberry jam or something, or you might be sent to fix a maintenance bot, and that's it. But then you find out how absurd it actually is along the way. Um, for a multitude of reasons. And there are plenty of people I've heard from that they've had entire teams kill each other or die in some way before they even got to the mission briefing. So before they even found out what they were supposed to be doing, they were all dead. Like all six, like everybody, they're all dead. And that's because there's there's some there's actually a few board game elements in this RPG, but one of them is sort of the hidden traitor aspect. Now, hidden traitor is, of course, there are plenty of board games that are based around hidden traitors and different teams, and you don't know who's who and blah blah blah, and you're trying to figure out who's going to betray me, who's the bad guy here. But in an RPG, that's most of the time that's like anathema. That you do not want a hidden traitor at your table. That is usually you call that person a dick. Paranoia, however, encourages it. Paranoia relishes in the hidden traitor. And that is because largely, well, one, it's because of the XP point system, the currency system, the reward system. You are rewarded. The game rewards you for reporting or dealing with someone that is not uh, not playing by the rules, as it were. Someone who's misbehaving, and also that is not always straightforward. And since the game encourages it, there could be situations where people might be set up to take a fall, or people might pass the blame onto other people. Um, it's not all just recording somebody doing something they're not supposed to, and oh look, I found a criminal, and give me my points. Um, there's going to be a lot of he said, she said kind of situations, and that's good. Like I said, the game encourages it. So there's that. There's that whole reward system, but then also there are what's called secret societies. So that free enterprise one is one of them, but there's a bunch of them, including communists. Obviously, the computer views communism as pretty damn treasonous. What else? What else do we got here? You have the Illuminati. They're a secret society. You have IntSec, who is really not a secret society. The computer will utilize the IntSec. So they themselves are not traitors, but they are like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an analogy that's appropriate. They will. I should probably just read this. IntSec is short for internal security, and they are nobody's friend. If troubleshooters are the first line of defense against terrorism, IntSec are the final line of defense against everything. They work in the shadows using undercover agents, wiretapping, eavesdropping, and stakeouts to ensure that no one in a position of responsibility is stepping out of line. They are, of course, almost universally corrupt. So, yeah, they're basically like the villainous sheriff in a Western movie or something like that. Like, they are sort of the law, but they are. You just. Unless you're like part of them, you want to steer clear of IntSec. Even if you're doing good things, it's just probably a good idea to steer clear. Um, you've got the freaks who are all about pro technology. They want to replace everybody with bots and stuff, and there's a whole bunch of them here. I'm not going to go over all of them. But there's a whole bunch of secret societies, and they all have their own agendas and their own goals and their own enemies. Um, Practically none of these secret societies get along with almost any other secret society. So they're all on the lookout for opposing secret societies, but it's also the fact that they are secret, most of them. So having proof that someone else is a member of a secret society and tattling on them to the computer is a guaranteed reward. That is treasonous activity. So at the start of a game of Paranoia, most of the time, each player will be handed one of these cards that says Secret Society on it. I don't know if I should probably say it's not that big of a deal, but some of these are effectively blank. So there is a chance you will not actually be a part of secret society. But most of these, yeah, there's secret societies for everybody. There's enough to go around. And so your secret society can also reward you for doing activities beneficial to that secret society. These are not XP point rewards because those are not transferable and only the computer can give them out. But they can benefit you in other ways. They might have equipment or information or whatever the GM can think of to reward you for being a good secret society member. And also, most of the time, if you are a part of the secret society, you sort of believe in what they represent. If you are a part of the free enterprise guys, most likely you believe in capitalism and yeah, that's pretty much it. It's all about capitalism. Raw, naked, bloody, hungry capitalism. So your goals then are to sniff out good deals and new business opportunities, get one over the other guy, ensure your superior's business interests are represented during the mission, and also to recruit new members. Recruiting new members is dangerous because, yeah, you might find somebody that really shares what you believe in, but you might find somebody that does not, and they could kill you, or they could rat on you to the computer and then kill you, things like that. So, since almost everybody has a good chance of being in one of these secret societies at the start of a mission, and they all have sort of their own goals aside from the mission, it leads to some issues. This is further developed with mutant powers. Basically, because all this cloning has been going on and this like genetic mutations and horribleness that's been going on for God knows how long, a lot of people have developed mutations. This is, of course, highly treasonous. The computer does not want mutants in its complex. So, anyone that uses a mutant power publicly they're not like automatically condemned. Just because the computer has cameras everywhere and can sort of see everything, it does not have the processing power to analyze everything. So, if you're in a room all by yourself and you teleport. So you're in a room all by yourself and you use teleport. You are not instantly condemned. You're not thrown into an incinerator because the computer's like, aha, I got you. Because that's why all the troubleshooters and stuff exist. That's why the computer needs everybody to report on things. Because it just cannot process all this video footage. I mean, that's a massive amount of video footage. The complex is huge. So really it's all about what other people see you doing and what people report on you doing. And yeah, you could report on somebody for using a mutant power, even though maybe they didn't use a mutant power, but maybe you could trick this computer into thinking that they used a mutant power, and yeah, who knows? I mean, that's part of paranoia. There's a lot of bluffing, there's a lot of he said, she said, and there's a lot of just shenanigans. Um, I'm at 45 minutes, so I want to move things along. So, specifically, rule wise, just talking about rules. At the start of a mission, people are often going to be given secret society cards. A lot of times they'll be given mutant cards. And then for the mission, they will also often be given role cards. These are not. They're not really important. They don't dictate that much. It's really just another way to to sort of make the players just fuck with each other. Um, so one of the roles here is the happiness officer. That's the role. You are responsible for ensuring that all happiness-related activities are carried out satisfactorily, maintaining team morale at or above approved levels, identifying and eliminating any lack of happiness and its underlying causes, and providing assistance, counseling, and additional happiness for anyone failing to be happy. So, you read that and you're like, okay, I'm the fucking happiness officer. And that might really just completely slip your mind while you're shooting some other clones or some bots or something like that. You're dealing with some horrendous situation. You're not thinking about happiness because you're not an insane computer. But then during the debriefing of a mission, that's where this really comes into play, because your debriefing officer, who reports to the computer or the computer itself, will talk to the group, the team, and debrief them and interview them. And so it might they might talk to all the other people and say, okay, how did the happiness officer do? Were you happy at all times during this mission? And some people might just have some beef and say, no, I was not happy. Or they might specifically want to just fuck over the happiness officer guy for whatever reason, because they did something they didn't like, or they know they're a part of some secret society, or who knows what. There's going to be shit. And so then it's like, okay, why was this person not happy? You failed in your role, so on and so forth. And then they have to explain themselves, and it's like, well, blah 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 blah. How well can you talk yourself out of this? There's the combat officer, the equipment officer, the team leader, the loyalty officer, and the science officer. And these roles do have some other in-game purpose. To a degree, like the team leader. Again, the game is sort of meant as a comedy. So for me, for like my group, I would almost always give the team leader to like Phil, because I know he'll fuck up everything all the time. And it's just funniest if he's the team leader, like designated the team leader. Um, it's kind of like, for those that have watched The Office, which I'm sure is most of you, when Charles Minor came in and took over the Scranton branch for a little while, and he like didn't know anybody, and he didn't understand any of their personalities or anything like that, and he put like Kevin on phones and stuff, and everyone's just like, what the fuck? That's pretty much like that's what's supposed to happen when you make somebody the team leader and stuff like that. That's what I think. The loyalty officer, that's a really important one, because loyalty is very important. So when at the end of the mission, when the computer asks the loyalty officer, who do you think was disloyal during the mission or anything like that, there's going to be high potential for some shouting at that point. So yeah, so rolls are kind of fun. There's also you are number one. It's just a card that says you are number one, and this is given to the number one troubleshooter in the group, somebody that did something really, really special. If you haven't caught on, this is just another card to fuck with people. That's pretty much the game. During the mission, you will also be given action cards. There are a lot of action cards. There's a whole deck of them. You will have a max of 4. These are replenished after combat, and they do all sorts of stuff. Some of them are incredibly sort of specific. Some of them are very specifically about combat. So like this one, Flesh Wound. Play on a target just as you or another PC is about to roll to attack them. If the roll is successful, then the wound causes the target to lose a limb. So that's a very specific combat reaction card, and you can play this, out of turn whenever you or another PC is about to roll to attack a target. You can slap this down, and this happens. And this could be used for fuckery, because it's like, say you're firing off a shot to like disarm somebody or something like that. It's like, nope, flesh wound, they lose a limb. So there's a bunch of cards like this that are very specifically combat related, but then there are just as many that have nothing to do with combat. That are just anytime an action occurs, action cards could come into play. So like this one, Opposite Day, it's not that everything goes wrong with the action, more that the exact opposite of what the target wanted to happen happens instead. GM Get Creative. So when you play this, if it says something like that, GM Get Creative or GM Time to Shine or something like that, you pass all control over the entire situation over to the GM. Completely. You have no control over it. The GM gets, and really, I mean, I think we're past the player point at this point, but the GM handbook is very specific about this. When a card like this is played, the GM is meant to just fuck shit up. Just, I mean, fitting the card, of course, somewhat. So this is sort of an opposite effect, but you're meant to make this just horrible, because that's funny most of the time. So, so you can, of course, use a bunch of these outside of combat in just different action, different situations, but they only replenish after combat. So, if you're a player, you want to be careful about how many you spend. But the GM handbook tells me that I'm supposed to encourage my players to spend them like they're going out of style or something like that. Because that's how it works. Finally, the last type of card is equipment cards. So this is your med kits and your miniguns, sniper rifles, grenades, so on and so forth. Anything that's not just like standard issue has an equipment card. And so these tell you, I'm not going to go into all the rules here, I just don't have enough time for it, but it goes into like the action order, which I'll talk about in a second, how large it is, and you can only carry a certain number of things, how many dice it adds to an action, and some special rules. Like for the minigun, it fires D6 times before it runs out of ammo, but the GM gets to roll, and you don't know how much ammo you have left. And of course, the GM is liable to not tell the truth. Because you have no idea. And it says you can't tell how many shots you've got left unless you take it apart. And I guarantee you, if you take apart your minigun, you are not putting it back together. So, Specifically, combat is very interesting because it is very board game-esque. Basically, at the start of each round, the GM counts to 5. He counts. It says 1 paranoia, 2 paranoia, so on and so forth, till it gets to 5. By the time it gets to 5, you have to have played a card face down. If you do not, you forfeit your action for the round. You can play any card from your hand, pretty much. It can be an equipment card, an action card, or a mutant card, and a mutant power card. And then, after that, the GM will count down from 10. And that's the action order. So if you want to go first, you would say, I have action number 10. The thing is, you don't have to be telling the truth about this. The action number is related to your card. So, like this Opposite Day card has an action order of 4. Some of them have action order of 0. Actually, a bunch of them do. There are cards that do have action order 10. So it's not like out of the realm of possibility. But you could be playing a reaction card that has like no action order on it. You could be playing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can lie about it. So even if you played a card that says action order 0, meaning you go pretty much last, you can say I have action order 10. I go first. You can lie about it, but the other players do have the right to challenge you about your bluff. So if you are challenged, you have to flip your card. If you were telling the truth, the challenger loses an action card from their hand. That's the penalty. If you were lying, the challenger gets to go immediately. They get to take an immediate action, meaning they get 2 actions per turn, or two actions for that round, because they get the immediate one and then they get their normal one that they played face down, which they, of course, can also bluff about. So there is a benefit to doing this. And in a normal RPG, this would never make sense. It'd be like, why would we bluff? Why would we do this? We're working together. That's paranoia. You're not really working together. You're on the same team, but you're not necessarily working together. It's a bit of a competitive RPG. And so the GM will count down from 10 until everybody goes. And so when it's your turn, you can... If you bluffed and nobody called you out on it, you don't actually have to flip the card. If you are using the text on the card, so if I'm using my sniper rifle, and that's what I put face down, if I want to use the sniper rifle, I have to reveal it. You can't just... I'm using my Gauss rocket launcher that I don't have it. You can't make things up like that. So if you're actually doing something, if you're using the action as written or whatever, you have to reveal it. But you don't have to. You can take the card back into your hand and just do a basic action, which is just, an action like in a regular RPG. You're shooting, you're moving, you're jumping, you're doing whatever without any sort of special modification or bonus. Or you can discard the card and do a basic action with +1 dice. So you have options. Speaking of dice, it is a D6 system. So you have... I'm going to go a bit over an hour, but what are we going to do? Hold on. Let me just show you the character sheet here. Okay, so the character sheet, there, stats. So you have 4 main stats: violence, brain, chutzpah, and mechanics. And then you have a bunch of skills, 16 different skills. So The skills are all sorts of stuff that you'd expect: athletics, melee, guns, science, bluff, demolitions, all sorts of stuff you'd expect. And each four set of skills lines up with a specific stat. So athletics, guns, melee, throw, those all fit into violence. Bluff, charm, intimidate, stealth, those all fall into chutzpah or chutzpah or whatever. So when you do an action, you're picking a stat and a skill that make the most sense. So most of the time for shooting somebody, you're going to have violence plus guns. But you might use guns in some other situation where, like, knowledge of guns helps. If you're, like, analyzing, like, a laser impact on a wall, or if you're talking to somebody about guns, or if you're fixing a gun or something like that. So when you do an action, you take the stat number and you take the skill number, you add them together, that's how many dice you get to roll. So these numbers range from like -5 to +5. Skills range from -5 to +5. And Karajan's really interesting. I'll get to that in a second. -5 to +5. And then stats range from 0 to 4. Having 4 in a stat is really rare because of how Karajan works. So, most of the time you'll end up with a positive number. You roll that many dice, and you count how many 5s and 6s you got, and those are your successes. So it's like Shadowrun, I suppose, or some other games, I'm sure. So 5s and 6s are successes. You want a bunch of successes. But if you add up the numbers and you get a negative number, so say I have -5 in guns and I'm trying to shoot somebody, I'm probably going to have a negative dice number. You don't roll negative dice because the book informs me that is treasonous. You roll that number of dice, so -4, you'd roll 4 dice. But any number that you roll that is not a success detracts from your successes. So if I roll a 1, a 3, a 5, and a 6, that's 0 successes. So that means you're very unlikely to succeed much, but there is a chance. So I kind of like that. In addition, you always roll this red computer die. This is a normal die except for the 6, which is replaced by this computer symbol. So you always get to add this, but really it's only good if you roll a 5. That counts as a success. If you roll the computer symbol, if you roll the 6, it is effectively... No, saying it's a critical fail is not right. You can still succeed at what you're trying to do. But rolling the computer basically gives the GM a license to fuck with you. And they will utilize it. It's going to be dependent on the situation, although the book does give me a list of suggestions. Here, right at the back, fun things to do with the computer dice. Here's one. The computer shows the troubleshooter an informative video that relates to their current situation that just so happens to block out most of their vision. So remember, this computer thing is inside your skull, the cortex. So it has control of your eyeballs. So yes, you can get pop-ups that cover your entire vision so you can't see anything. And the computer just doesn't really understand that that's bothersome. So yeah, computer dice is going to be all sorts of fuckery. It doesn't have to be specifically the computer messing with you. I think there were some suggestions in here that were not. Yeah, your secret society hijacks your audio feed and delivers you a special mission, or your supervisor arrives, or things like that. So it doesn't have to specifically be the computer messing with you, but overall, it just gives the GM license to screw with you. Okay. Pretty much the last thing I want to talk about is care gen, because it's very interesting. Okay, so character generation. It starts off pretty normal and then gets wild. So you start off with your name, your gender, your personality, your no, not your personality. Your name, your gender, your appearance. That's pretty much what you start with. Oh, and then you write 3 adjectives that describe your character. So these tend to be positive, but they don't have to be. So these could be loyal, helpful, friendly, whatever. Just 3 words, 3 adjectives. Then you're going to do your skills. So this is a round table thing. You go one at a time. And you start off with +1. So the first player, they pick 1 skill out of the 16, and they put a +1 next to it. So they have that skill at +1. The person to their left takes that same skill and puts a -1 next to it. So if I want to have a +1 in charm, the person on my left is going to have a -1 in charm. And that goes around until everyone has a +1 and a -1 to skills. So they have some skill that's at +1, some skill that's at -1. Then it goes to +2 and -2. Then +3 and -3, and +4 and -4, and finally +5 and -5. So I think most often the big one is probably going to be guns, because that's likely to come up in every mission, I feel. So the person that has +5 in guns is doing all right. The person that has -5 in guns, probably not going to be shooting anybody. But it might not make it to -5 and +5 for guns, because somebody might just be like, fuck that, I'm just going to take +2 to guns and be happy about it. You never know. So maybe the 5s will end up being really lame stuff, like alpha complex knowledge or something. So that's all the skill thing. So yeah, the whole thing consists of you picking skills that you want, but at the same time fucking over the person to your left, and the person on your right probably fucking you over with some skills that you wanted, and so on and so forth. Then for stats, you take, so for each category, like the violence category that I talked about, those 4 skills, you count up how many you have positive numbers in, and that's your violence score. So if you have positive scores in athletics, guns, melee, throw, you have a 4 violence. You can see how that's very unlikely, because somebody's going to screw you over for something. So having a 3 or 4 is pretty good. To have all your violence skills have a positive number, that's pretty good. And that does include 0, I think. Yeah, it includes 0. But unfortunately, it's even worse than that. Because the person to your left then takes those stats that you just assigned, and they get to assign them however they want. So even though you might have all positives in violence, so all 4 of those skills down there have positive numbers, you have a 4 violence. No, probably not, because they're going to take that 4 violence and they're going to put it in mechanics or something, or chutzpah. Because they know that you want to be using your guns and your melee. You fucked them over on all that shit. You got positive numbers and all that stuff. You want to be violent. You're not getting to be violent. So it's just a very angry, vindictive character generation, which sets the tone. Um, then you can spend moxie points to sort of boost your skills and stats a little bit. So Moxie, everyone starts with 8 Moxie. Moxie is basically your stress slash sanity. So when you hit 0 Moxie, you lose it. You go sort of off the chain. Um, this is sort of up to you to roleplay. But you're gonna go wild in some sense. They tell you the best thing to do is like take one of your personality traits and ramp it up to like 700. So if you are loyal and you lose it, you could suddenly be uber loyal and think that everybody around you is not loyal enough or something like that, and you might just start shooting people because they're not loyal enough to the computer. Things like that. Most of the time when you lose it, you're probably going to die in some way, but you never know. So you start with 8. You can spend some to raise some stats and skills, and you lose them when you roll the computer dice. Anytime you roll the computer or the computer symbol, you lose 1 moxie. And some other things can make you lose it, but I'm not going to go into it. And then finally, oh, so you can burn Moxie points to raise skills. You can burn clones to raise stats, because stats are more important. So everyone starts with 6 clones. So you can burn up to 5 clones, raising your stats. So if you want 1 life and you're really, yeah, I'm great, really just a powerful character, you can do that. I don't know how smart that is, but you can do it. Finally, one last screw over moment. The person on your left looks at the 3 adjectives that you picked for your personality, and they flip one of them. Whatever one they want, they make it the opposite. So if you were helpful, suddenly you're unhelpful. If you were loyal, suddenly you're disloyal. If you were kind, suddenly you're unkind. So on and so forth. It's just another thing. There are, of course, rules for characters coming in late, or one person loses all their clones and they need to make a new character and join in. Things like that. There are rules for them to just solo generate, but the full character gen seems very amusing to me. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else really essential that I talk about. Because I don't want to make this a multi-part video, and I don't want to make this too long. There's obviously a lot I could talk about. If I really wanted to go nuts, I could talk about all the secret societies and all the different fun little tidbits. But I guess I'll leave that to you if you want to pick up this game and read the books yourself. So, like I said, I haven't played this yet, but I am very much looking forward to running some sessions. This would be our first comedy game, and there aren't many we've never encountered one before. I don't know exactly how that pans out. There's a lot of advice for running Paranoia in here, and one of the things they say is to not force the humor. So don't try and come up with jokes or funny situations or anything like that. Don't plan jokes ahead of time or anything like that just because you're running a comedy game. It needs to be organic, and I think that's not really a problem for our group because pretty much no matter what game we're playing, pretty much every session we're laughing a lot. Jokes just come up, funny situations crop up, and we usually just have most of our RPGs tend to be comedy in a way, anyways. So I think our group would probably be a really good fit for Paranoia. Because I think we're all used to I think they're all used to having characters die because of of PvP activity, largely because of me. So with me running it, I'm very curious to see how it'll go. Um, but there's a lot of things that interest me with the mechanics, the character generation, sort of the board game elements really intrigue me. I'm not that huge into board games right now, but sort of combining the I mean, hidden trader board games and card games are practically my favorite type. So that's cool. To combine that with an RPG is a very unique experience, I think. And to have the cards in there and the way combat works and the action cards. And I like the setting. It could be run as just a straight RPG. And there are people that do run Paranoia as just a straight RPG without the comedy elements. Um, Having just a science fiction dystopian RPG set in a giant complex with sort of not a maniacal but a somewhat insane AI running everything is an interesting enough premise for an RPG. So yeah. Oh, the other thing is achievements. I forgot to mention that because that's really funny as well. Let me look it up. But oftentimes for the mission, at the start of a mission, you will be given the players will be given a list of achievements for that mission. So this is a lot like, achievements in Xbox Live or trophies or whatever. These are challenges that players can complete during the course of a mission um, to earn extra XP points. I wish I could find the little list they had because it's a good way to explain it. Oh, you can also use Moxie. It's not just like your sanity. You can also spend it um, to get extra dice for a roll or to re-roll your dice. And mutant powers all require Moxie to use. So, since you only have 8 Moxie for your character for your clone, um, using mutant powers, you can go through it very quickly. You might only get to use your mutant powers a couple times. Damn it, I can't. Why would it not be in here? Oh, here you go. So, you might earn 50 XP points for repairing malfunctioning technology, 100 XP points for bringing a terrorist to justice, 100 XP for confessing, or XP points for confessing your own treasonous acts to friend computer, 400 XP points, save a crowd of citizens from imminent danger. Now, yeah, you might be the one that actually sets up that situation where they are put in imminent danger. But hey, if you save them, it's 400 XP points. 2,000 XP points. Perform actions leading to the arrest of an entire cell of a secret society. That would be pretty big. So those are all like very generic ones. Generally, you'll have ones specifically tailored to a mission. Um, which can make people sort of raise an eyebrow right when the mission starts. Like, oh, go here and clean up some jam. Here's an achievement: 500 XP points for using a rocket launcher to destroy a tank. It's like, what the fuck? Because there will be an opportunity to complete these achievements. They're not just random. They are tailored to a mission. So the GM knows potentially what's coming down the line. So there's definitely some fun to be had there. The interesting thing is those achievements can only be scored once per mission. So only one person can collect one of them. So it just adds more to the rivalry and competition and stuff like that. I don't know if this video, like I said, this video is not going to be a decent explanation of Paranoia. But basically, it's a comedic science fiction RPG set in a giant complex filled with clones and run by a insane AI. I think that's just the one sentence tag there. Um, you can run it how you want, but it does lean towards just sort of ridiculous situations and short lives. There there's some artwork in here that's, well, quite frankly, the artwork in here is not that good. But there there's some artwork that really just shows the absurd situations that some missions might get up to. Let me see if I can just find it. Probably not. I wonder where I read that. There was one that was like. No, there was one that was definitely about like orange jelly or something like that. I don't know. I'm probably not gonna find it, but it had a funny image. I don't know. It's oh, there it is. Oh yeah, it's right at the start of the player's handbook. So, um, yeah, it's just them. What is this? Oh, the team is wading along a warm red soup duct, and of course it doesn't go well for them. Like that it's the complex, not infinite in size, obviously, but as far as the players are concerned, it's effectively infinite in size. So it's fucking massive. And so you might just have this whole giant warehouse just filled with red soup that's piped throughout the whole complex because everybody gets some red soup. And so yeah, you might just have a whole warehouse filled with this stuff, and that's part of the mission. Um, so there's just going to be a lot of situations and missions and things like that you would not find in any other RPG. And that alone is interesting, combined with all the competitive, comedic, hidden traitor, crazy shenanigans, and the computer. The GM is really there to just fuck people over. Not to be a dick, but just to make things funny. Like, that's emphasized over and over. It's just like, if you don't like how things are going, just change it. Just switch things up. Just make things interesting. Um, and there's no like baseline of normalcy that people are expecting here. Like, be prepared for anything and don't get too attached to anything. If your character just suddenly gets zapped for whatever reason and drops dead, you got more clones. You just keep going, and even if you are all out, it's meant for short games. This is not big, epic, heavy campaign stuff that I normally deal with, and that's part why I'm so interested. I really want just a, in between a campaign, 1 week we're between this Shadow of the Demon Lord campaign before we move on to Sprawl, and we're just, instead of just jumping boom boom, let's just fit Paranoia in the middle. Just have some fun and just get wacky with stuff. We tend to get a little wacky anyways, but this is off the deep end. So it really interests me. I'm looking forward to running it and playing it. So we'll see whenever that happens. This could have been a longer primer, a couple parts, but if you're really interested, just pick up the game yourself. This is the brand new edition. It's got everything you need for like $35, so that'll do you. All right, I'm done. Quickest primer ever. My name is Mang. This has been the primer on Paranoia. red clearance edition, and I will see you fine folks around.